Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. And welcome to the third session of the PATA Annual Summits. We're looking at Reflect, Reconnect, and Revive. First, allow me to introduce myself once again. My name is Paul Purangan. I am the Director of Communications and External Affairs at the Pacific Asia Travel Association. And of course, I am your host for today's PIS 2021 Forum. Before we get to this session, I do, of course, want to just go through some technical notes for those of you who are joining us. If you're joining us on the Attendify web platform, you will see on the right-hand side of your screen, this is for the web version, there is a function to chat or submit questions. So feel free to submit, to introduce yourself to your fellow attendees, where you're from, what you're doing, how you're doing, what you're thinking of the sessions, interact and network with your other delegates attending today. If you're viewing on the mobile version, you can easily do the same just by clicking on session chat, and then you can just submit any questions or chat with your fellow attendees. Don't forget to bookmark the session or set reminders for any of those sessions that are happening either later today or over the next few days. Now, without further ado, we've come to the session 3, Revive, Revitalizing the Industry. We're looking at two sectors, aviation and hospitality. You know, as we know, the travel and tourism industry has been facing extraordinary crisis. However, vaccine rollout plans are happening across the globe. So we'll take a look. We'll take a look at two sectors of the industry, aviation and hospitality, and how they're coping with sort of the recovery and the future of travel. And first up, we have the aviation discussion. And with that, I would like to welcome the moderator for our session. Many of you probably have seen him on BBC. He's the business news presenter at BBC World News. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Aaron Hesselhurst. Aaron?
Hi, Paul. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Aaron. I'll pass this over to you. It's just, let me stop sharing and I'll let you take over. Oops, sorry. I'll just go forward. Things like this always happen, but easily fixed. All right, I'll pass this over to you. You can introduce your fellow panelists.
I sure will. Thanks very much, Paul, once again. And again, hello, everybody. Lovely to be, well, virtually with you all. Hopefully one day we can all see each other in person. Look, times are ticking. Let's get cracking. I want to introduce two familiar faces and friends to many of us. long time in the aviation world. So let me start by introducing Sir Tim Clark, the big boss, the president of Emirates Airlines, and of course, Paul Griffiths, the big boss, the chief executive of Dubai Airports. To you both, gentlemen, a real pleasure seeing you. Hey, Sir Tim, I'm going to just go with Tim, of course. Tim, let me start with you. And you and I have spoken a couple of times over the past year, but look, let me start with this. You know, many of us were hoping that this year was going to be a brighter picture than last year. But if we look at the picture, what we've got, more than 3 million people on the planet have died from COVID. We've got possibly more dangerous variants spreading around the world. Given that picture, paint us a brief picture of where Emirates is today in terms of your schedules, in terms of your flight numbers.
Well, first of all, hi, Aaron. Nice to see you after all this time. In terms of where we are today, look, we've managed to keep the airline operating fairly successfully, primarily with our 777 fleet. We have 151 of those. Most of those are operating. We're carrying about 18-20% of the normal passenger load that we would do. So you can imagine that hurts. But on the other hand, the freight has been particularly strong. So we're holding our own. We're managing the cash situation, and we're serving about 114 cities at the moment out of the 157 that we used to serve. So that's not too bad. But we've had to go through some very difficult times, of course, as every airline in the world has had to.
Indeed. And Tim, you recently launched Emirates' first fully vaccinated flight, as did Qatar Airways. But look, it was a flight to nowhere. But I want to ask you this. I'm just wondering if it would have had more of an impact if it was a fully vaccinated flight to an actual proper destination.
Yeah, I think this was early days. It was a trial to see what we could do. It was a testament to the way the UAE has inoculated virtually 100% of its population now, and to showcase what we could do. Obviously, the crew have all been inoculated some time ago. To cobble together 400 odd passengers as well demonstrates that it can be done. So for those that are looking at this, we can mount operations in the future, providing that the health protocols, travel certification rules are established and well understood, that we can do this on an aircraft the size of a 380, and that was the point of doing that.
Right, it was a test. It was a test flight, and we're going to talk about vaccinations and vaccination passports very shortly. But just let me briefly ask you this: are you having to fly planes out with passengers and then return those planes empty if they're sort of so-called these red flag destinations? I'm kind of thinking South Africa here.
Well, we're not actually flying to South Africa at the moment, but to take the case of the United Kingdom, obviously the UAE currently is red listed. So we fly into the UK, obviously with lots of freight on board because that's very strong, with no passengers. And we return under the rules of the game for passengers departing the UK with passengers. Well, you know, that's two, 3 flights a day. That's all out of the 21 that we did have.
Does that make economical sense? I mean, I'm assuming it does, because you wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
Of course it does. The freight yields are very strong. The volumes are very strong. Passenger yields are very high at the moment. So it certainly makes a contribution to the operation of the flight.
And Paul, great to see you as always. But Paul, look, before we talk about Dubai Airport's measures that you've put in place, I want to talk about this. And just briefly, I mean, you're still the world's, congratulations, you're still the world's biggest international airport, but just how bad has it been? Paint us a picture of, you know, the drop in passenger numbers and what that's meant to Dubai Airport.
Well, Aaron, look, it's good to be here. Good to talk to you, and I'm very pleased to be asked to participate in this PARTO webinar. First of all, of course, it's been incredibly dramatic. You know, we were virtually closed for a month last year, and now traffic is only, after about a year, back to about 20% of the normal throughput. We're around the 2 million mark, where in a typical peak month, we're around the 8 million mark. So 91 million passengers per year we had in 2019. And so it has been dramatic. And of course, we've had to react dramatically as well. We've had to furlough a huge number of staff. We've had to change contracts. We've had to renegotiate with suppliers. we've had to make huge savings in our overall operational expenditure just to keep liquid. And I'm pleased to say that we've achieved that, but we'll come out of this with a significantly lower employee base and a far more efficient operation as a result. So it's been very testing, I have to say.
And Paul, I'm just wondering if you have the harder job here out of the two of you in terms of reassuring the passenger. I mean, we know the studies that we've seen that, you know, catching COVID on board an aircraft is very minimal. A lot of the worry for passengers is that airport experiencing, passing through an airport with thousands of other people. How do you reassure them?
Well, it's not easy when you've got prominent politicians saying that we carry additional risk because we're a transit hub, because we don't carry that risk. We've been absolutely clinical in our approach. We've put UV disinfection processes throughout the airport. We've doubled up on the cleaning. Every single staff member wears masks and all the protection equipment necessary. We've put perspex screens at all the passenger touch points. We've eliminated any process where you basically have to touch anything that isn't your own. So when you leave the country, for example, we've now enabled iris recognition and facial recognition at all the customer touch points. And actually one positive outcome, I think, of the pandemic will be a lot of the customer facing bureaucracy that we've had to go through for decades will finally be gone because there's a medical reason to take it away now. So there are some positive upsides, but you're absolutely right, Aaron, trying to reassure the public that we are taking all the necessary measures that we can to make the airport a safe environment has been difficult, but it's been backed up by thousands of people who've all rallied together to do a pretty good job, if I may say. So the airline airport combination here, I think, has shown the world the way to do it. And I think we've got some very positive feedback from our customers as a result.
Just on that point, and briefly if we can, how well are your customers, how well are the passengers adhering to all the measures?
Well, they either adhere to the measures or basically they don't board the flight or check in. We don't allow anyone into the terminals without PPE. Of course, everyone's checked for PCR. We're not allowing anyone onto any flight to any destination without a proper PCR test. And people are adhering to it. You know, there's a little bit of problem with things like forged PCRs, but we're introducing a QR code now, which we can verify back to a database to make sure that PCRs are not forged. And of course, the technology is moving on. You know, Tim has talked publicly about the idea that PCR tests need to be quicker and more affordable. Of course, we need to do that. Anyone needing a PCR test on arrival, by the way, at Dubai airports, because if people do arrive with either without the right entry requirements, can get a PCR test on arrival for free. And that doesn't imply that people people get on the aircraft at their origin point without a PCR. Of course, they have to comply with the local limits. But if they are required, they're on the list to require a second PCR when they arrive here, we administer that at no cost.
Okay, let's talk about the hot topic at the moment. I mean, it's been the hot topic, well, over the last few months, and it continues to be so, vaccination passports. And Tim, I've interviewed, you know, many airline CEOs, certainly over the past year, but just recently, a few of them, including our friend Alan Joyce, the Chief Executive Officer of Qantas, who says that he's going, when Qantas opens internationally again, he's going to insist on all international travelers to be vaccinated, double dose, of course. In fact, he's even talked about, even last November, he talked about possibly changing the terms and conditions on the ticket that international travelers be vaccinated. Where do you sit on that page?
Well, I think, these are two separate issues, Aaron. First of all, for me, the panacea to the problem has always been vaccination rollouts and the protocols involved with that. This was a Herculean task given the process of research into scaling up production and distribution. And we're still going through the difficulties of that. We, as Emirates, never stipulated at any point in time that that was going to be mandatory to entering an Emirates aircraft. We always knew that once the inoculation program had worked at speed and pace throughout the planet, that eventually large swathes of the population would be inoculated anyway, hopefully dealing with the double mutation variants that we're now getting out of India and other places like that. But essentially, it was my belief that this was going to be the solution to the problem. And that in many respects, you would not have to legislate, if you like, against people not having vaccinations, because so many people would be vaccinated under the herd immunity syndrome. But it is not for the airlines to make that decision. Frankly, those decisions will be taken by the states in which the passengers that they are carrying arrive into. And I don't think, I'm not trying to pass the buck on this. I know Alan had very good reasons for saying and doing what he's done. But I don't think there is a need for that, because in the end, the airline community will be told under what conditions it can take passengers into the countries that they're destined to fly to. That in itself will take care of that particular issue.
Sorry, he also added he believes governments will insist on it. Do you believe that, though? Do you believe governments will insist on passengers? Go on.
I think in the short term, Aaron, that's likely to happen, simply because, I say in the short term, in the next 2 or 3 years, it is likely that this particular virus is likely to mutate into various forms. We've seen one happening at the moment. So the governments are going to be particularly concerned for all sorts of reasons that these kind of variants do not arrive in their countries. So there are two things going on here. One is that they're trying to identify through genomic sequencing what are the problems with these and how to deal with them through the vaccination program if the current vaccines don't deal with it. And the second is, how do you deal with future variants? So both point to vaccination programs evidenced through the automated systems, hopefully we can introduce as an airline industry, and acceptable to the countries that they're flying to. And I think that's likely to be the case. So the states, in answer to the question, will mandate that for the next 2 or 3 years, in my view, they're going to need some kind of evidence prior to departure from the boarding point that you have met the travel certification requirements for their countries.
Yeah. And before we move on, he also added that he has a responsibility, as I'm sure, as you do, a responsibility to the passengers on board and, of course, to your crew.
Absolutely. That goes without saying, actually, Aaron. Right from the early days, back in the summer of last year, we introduced very stringent protocols on our flights, vaccinated our crews as quickly as possible, trying to make sure that everybody who gets on an Emirates flight is PCR negative before they do 48 or 72 hours before. And also there is all sorts of other country requirements, track and trace, PCR evidence, etc. So at the moment, we are like as sterile as we could be in flight.
Because there are many who disagree with this, including the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, the World Health Organization. They argue it's just going to worsen the inequality and deny travel for people, particularly from the developing nations who are further behind in the vaccine rollout. I mean, some of these developing economies are not expected to be fully vaccinated until the end of 2022. So it will create a divide, won't it?
Yeah, I understand that. And I have been banging the drum for over 6 or 9 months to make sure that there is an equitable distribution of vaccines. And clearly that hasn't happened. And this presents problems not just for the aviation hospitality sector, but all sorts of other sectors. And therefore, we need to, as I say, at the G7, at the G20 summits, where there are entities like the World Health Organization, WTTC, they need to be emphasizing the equality of vaccine rollout, so everybody gets it, not just the rich West. Now, and of course, but until that happens, we're going to have to deal with a mismatch of passengers, some who've been inoculated, others haven't. But there will be other track and trace, there will be PCR, there'll be all sorts of other forms of checking and maintaining some kind of sterility in the aeroplanes or in the airports.
Do you agree with Sir Tim about the vaccination and the vaccination passports and his viewpoint. I mean, do you agree? Do you think that governments will insist that, especially for international travelers, that in the short term, maybe next 2 or 3 years, that you're going to have to be vaccinated if you want to get on board?
Well, this is nothing new, really, is it? You know, I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember those those yellow passports we used to have to carry around showing that we had been vaccinated for yellow fever when we had to go through certain countries, mostly in Africa or South America. So actually, it isn't something new, but it's not up to the airlines. This is where I think Tim's exactly on the money. It's not up to the airlines or the airports to mandate that. It is the country receiving the passenger who has to dictate what standards are there. And I think, you know, the way Qantas and Alan Joyce has positioned this is exactly right. But I think he's working very closely with the Australian government, and it will be ultimately the government that determines what the entry requirements are to Australia. And I think you'll find that will gather momentum around the world, and very soon it will be a requirement until the situation improves that we all will have to be vaccinated. After all, there's a great linear relationship that's emerging now between those countries who have made excellent progress on their vaccination programs and the way COVID-19 is receding to be a threat in those countries. Look at the stats on Israel, the UAE, the UK, the US, for example. They're all pretty good. And I think the rest of the world needs to get to that standard. So the distribution of vaccine and the equalization of the availability of vaccination is incredibly important if we want to get global personal mobility back, which I think 4 billion people that have been under lockdown over the last year are desperate to get back to.
About testing, I mean, the UK Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, has recently said that COVID tests need to be cheaper. In fact, I had the big boss of TUI, you know, Europe's largest travel group, on just a week ago. He also agreed with that. It's too expensive. Do you agree with that? And who should pay for testing?
Well, to the first question, it's an absolute no-brainer. There's no way that you can subject people who are traveling on you mentioned TUI, on package holidays, etc., to pay £100, £150 per head, and then have to do the same in return, whatever, and also possibly have to do the same in the country that they go to, but prior to they boarding the flight. So in the end, you've got a family of 4. They could end up with £1,000 supplement just for the PCR. So that just can't work. So one, we have to do better with the PCR tests themselves. That's true, quick tests, etc. And of course, they've got to be made much cheaper. There is an industry out there that has thrived on what has happened. And as industries like this scale up, so the unit cost of production or the unit cost of producing these fall, those have got to be passed through. Now, some way or other, we've got to make this one work. So that, and who pays it? Well, hopefully, if the prices fall to a level where they can be absorbed by the airfare, that's one thing, but that's not the way you would ordinarily go. You tend to pass it on to the consumer. But in the case of Emirates, when we introduced insurance, we guaranteed people wherever they flew on us that if they got COVID and all the subsequent problems that they incurred, we would pay that. So health insurance was absorbed into our fares, and we absorbed all. So I'm not going to say we are going to pay or the consumer is going to pay. The first thing is sort the PCR tests out themselves. Secondly, reduce the cost of them, produce them to scale, make them quickly and readily available with results coming back within 30 seconds. That's what you need to do if you're going to consist.
So we all agree that testing should be cheaper, but I just asked him, but who do you think should be paying for it?
Well, I think the thing is, I agree with Tim. I mean, first of all, obviously, the unit cost of these tests needs to come down and the rapidity of them. I'm not sure if we can get down to the 30-second test, but if we could, that would be magnificent. But I think the thing is, you know, at the end of the day, this should be a requirement that should be such a low cost because of the volumes of that would need to be produced globally, that we could get down to, you know, a very, very low cost, which could be absorbed in the air ticket. So I really do think as a service, I'm sure the UAE government, whether through the airlines or through the airports somehow will find a way of making sure this isn't an onerous burden on the traveller. So we don't want to put any burden onto the traveller to make sure that we can keep the cost of travel down and affordable to the millions of people that come here every year.
Paul, you know, I'm looking at a recent IATA survey of passengers, and it found that 49% believe that air travel restrictions have gone too far. 84% believe that COVID-19, it's not going to disappear. We know that. And that we need, these 84% believe that we need just to manage its risks while living and trying to travel normally. Do you believe that? Do you believe the restrictions have gone too far?
Well, I think the thing is, what we're trying to balance here is personal mobility and all the social and economic benefits that that brings against the risk of medical threat. And I think the problem is governments are not making a particularly good job of that in some parts of the world. And then I think there's difficulty in some jurisdictions about social compliance. And, you know, you see people reacting against, and the longer this goes on, the more difficult that's going to become. But ultimately, we cannot continue in a risk avoidance scenario, the sort of thing that's happened in Australia and New Zealand, for example, where they've basically shut tourism down. And that being such a major plank of the economy there, I think the social and economic impacts of that will go on far longer than the threat from COVID-19. And I think the difficulty, governments really are primarily, and one could say rightly so, looking at trying to restrict the impact of COVID-19 on their domestic populations. And the difficulty is balancing that agenda against the mobility agenda with all of its social and economic benefits. So I think restrictions have not been harmonized, and as they haven't been harmonized, in some cases, they are clearly overcautious. But until we get to some form of bilateral agreement country to country, we cannot relate the appropriate level of restrictions that are required with what's actually happening out there at the moment. So a lot more agreement has to come, probably bilaterally rather than multilaterally, where that just doesn't seem to be possible on a global scale.
Let's just, I know time's a ticking here. Let's just quickly move on to the International Air Transport Association, IATA, of course, and their travel pass, right? Which is designed to help manage passengers of vaccine and testing data. But Tim, it really does. I mean, for something like that to work, it really does rely on enough governments and enough airlines to, excuse the pun, but to get on board. Can that really work, do you think? And are you seeing enough of your airline peers, you know, getting on board with the IATA travel pass?
Well, I think the IATA travel pass is a first step. It's the right step to take. If we can cobble together, and it is not without its difficulties, Aaron, for some of the reasons that we've talked about. In the third developing world, the ability to digitize data and put it into systems that speak to airline systems is not without its problems and difficulties. The airlines like ourselves and others can probably do that. So we can bring together, as we do, the health authority data, which can be uploaded into a variety of apps. In fact, I'm looking at mine. If you just see that, that is the Dubai Health Authority app. It shows my vaccines and all the COVID tests I've had. It has everything about me in there. And we can do this. We can then draw down the IATA app. We can put in our photographs and our sort of picture, passport status, and then upload the DHA, Department of Health data into that. So with a QR code. So all this is possible. You're right. What happens to those countries to the point that haven't been vaccinated, as well as not having the ability to do that? You know, the airline industry is a great seat of pants operation. They do wonderful workarounds. They've always done that in the time that I've been in the business, which is longer than most, I should say. And I've seen workarounds work, and I've seen how resourceful they become because it's so important to them, particularly someone like Emirates, which does a lot of work in the developing world, Africa, South America, parts of Asia. So it's in our interest to get this done. Will this get traction? I hope so. The membership of IATA, as you well know, tends to embrace most of the carriers in the world who are, if the leaders of IATA, Willie Walsh has just taken over, are minded to get this done, and there are like-minded airlines such as ourselves who want to get it done, it does eliminate a lot of the hurdles and impediments and roadblocks you would get in airports, border force controls of entry, etc. So it's vital we do this. You know, it's anybody's guess as to what, but to do nothing is not an option. So if I want to lead this and people like us want to get on board with it, we'll do it.
I know our friends at Parter are watching the clock, but just quick 2 topics before we end. The 380. Look, we know, or many know, probably you are probably the biggest airline CEO fan of that big beast. Many of the other airlines, I mean, they've parked them up. They've said they're not returning them post-pandemic. You and I have talked about this before. You kind of bet the farm on this plane, and Paul built the infrastructure at the airport. I would assume you're going to tell us that there's a role for them still in a post-pandemic world.
Answer is yes. Of course I do.
But you have to say that, right? What are you're sitting on 120 of them plus, aren't you?
I don't have to say that, Aaron. I believe it to be the case. And there are a number of reasons which we really don't have time to go into at this point in time. But the 380 does give you the history at a time when we've had enormous difficulties in the global economy. We've had enormous difficulties with fuel prices. We've had enormous difficulties with the volatility of demand, currencies, etc., etc. The one single thing that has made money for us consistently since we introduced the aircraft was the A380. At one point, it was generating 80% of our profits. It is hugely popular. We continue to believe that as a global super hub, and we continue to believe that that will be the case, notwithstanding some of the questions you will probably ask me about point-to-point traffic. But,
you know me so well.
But the 380 will still be a primary driver in our business model for as long as it's able to fly, bearing in mind that it will stop production imminently.
Okay. We know this point to point. I mean, there's no doubt that the pandemic has fueled the desire even more so, right? I mean, people don't want to, when we can travel, people would prefer to fly direct as opposed to transferring through a large hub and mingling with multiple thousands of other passengers. Again, Alan Joyce said it, their Project Sunrise, Europe to East Coast of Australia, they're cracking forward with that. And if that is the case, then that's why I was going to say to you, I mean, it's hard to see. I mean, that, for both of you, actually, for Paul and the airport and the hub model and those 380s, it doesn't work, does it?
Well, of course, I couldn't agree with you less. Listen, let's assume, I'll be as brief as I can, that in a couple of years we are free of this pandemic, and the World Health Organization has declared that the pandemic is over, that the vaccine protocols are working effectively, the efficacy of all these vaccines which will come out with the greatest minds of medical research working on all of this. Let's assume that we're back to normal. The notion that you would fly from Seattle to Dar es Salaam with a 7879 or a A350-900 and fill it up meaningfully is probably doubtful. On the other hand, if you've got multiple points on the west coast of the US who wish to fly to Dar es Salaam, and we cobble together all of those, and they come into the super hub within 2 hours of arriving, they're on the way to Dar es Salaam, then probably that's going to make much more economic sense than flying a twin over that 16-hour mission with very few people on it. After all, there aren't many people going from Seattle to Dar es Salaam, but there are a lot of people going from the West Coast collectively in aggregate that meet our it. So the more you layer on of these points, the more the unit costs fall, and the incremental revenue is just money in your pocket. That's how it works in terms of the hubs like this. But I'm not saying that there will not be more point-to-point. We have, for instance, the Airbus 321XLR, which has got range capability, transatlantic, etc. It can serve smaller points quite easily, smaller city pairs. But when you really want to get to places like the continent of Africa, or other places in the Indian Ocean, or the west, the subcontinent of India, okay, this is the way to do it. When you arrive from Seattle again, or San Francisco, or Los Angeles, or Chicago, all the places we fly to, or Europe, when you hit a hub at 12:30 in the morning, 00:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, there are as many as 80 and 90 to 100 destinations that you can feed onto immediately. And this makes a lot more economic sense. Let's assume then, circling back to what I said, was that everything is over and done with, the pandemic is over. When people hit the hub, of course, that hub will continue to be expanded, to grow, etc. All the ground facilities, Paul's airport here, will be expanded and the quality improved. So it'll be a far greater, better place to transit through than perhaps it has been in the past, although it's been fantastic. Let's be quite honest. Emirates has succeeded on the basis of how it's managed the heart of its business, which is our hub in Dubai.
So, Paul, that must be music to your ears, what Tim just said about, his belief, we know that, his belief in the role of the 380 post-pandemic. And I say music to your ears because you've built all that infrastructure for those big beasts. But I'm wondering, we know Sir Tim has been trying to retire for the past year, and that is coming around the corner. What happens if Emirates gets a new president, a new CEO in there that has a very similar mindset to many of the other airline CEOs and says, there isn't a role for the 380? That would be a huge hit. I mean, that'd be a huge hit to your airport.
Well, with 117 aircraft in the fleet, it would be a major challenge to say that we're going to do a U-turn on that strategy. I just don't think that's possible. And actually, I think the thing is that where I do
But that wouldn't be your decision, though, or would it? No.
It wouldn't be our decision, no. But you pose the question: if an incoming CEO or president of Emirates said, I don't believe in the 380, we're going to U-turn on that, I just don't see how that is possible. And I think also it's unnecessary, because the fantastic combination of Emirates and its reputation and DXB as a hub uniquely can make that combination work better than any airline airport combination. When you look at our geocentricity here in Dubai, we're in 8 hours flying time at 2/3 of the world's population here. We can make that super hub work. We're clearly, pandemic or no pandemic, you said it in your introduction, Aaron, we're still the largest international airport in the world, and that's thanks to that. But I think there are two other dimensions that I can bring to this argument. The first is, over about a 3,000 nautical mile journey, point to point, which I know is one of your great bugbears, actually doesn't make economic or ecological sense, because you have to carry the fuel to burn, to carry the fuel you need to get to your destination. And if you look at the statistics, when Qantas did that record-breaking flight from JFK to Sydney, they burnt 101 tons of aviation fuel. If they'd have stopped, or if they'd have fed a hub like Dubai, and you'd done JFK, Dubai, Sydney, not only might that be a slightly more bearable experience in terms of the time, but also if you look at the fuel burn per passenger and try and compare the two, they are just completely chalk and cheese. So there is a massive case for hubs. And, from Conakry to Kota Kinabalu, there is never going to be a direct flight. So hubs are actually massive aggregation opportunities. They bring the world together in a way no direct service can. And as Tim said, smaller aircraft with longer legs will just make the hub stronger, because we'll be able to serve even more marginal destinations because of the aggregation power of the hub. So 380 and DXB, I love them. They're here to stay for the long future, and I think they will continue to make huge economic sense for a long time to come.
I wish I had more time, but I've got to wrap it up. So Tim Clark, the big boss, the president of Emirates, and of course, Paul Griffiths, the chief executive officer of Dubai Airports. Both of you, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with everything. Stay safe and well, and we'll check in with you soon.
Well, thanks for allowing me to participate. Thanks to Parter. Got a very good number of friends out in Asia. So thanks very much for the time to present today. And thanks, Aaron, for your incisive and witty interview technique. It's famous the world over.
Thank you. Thank you. And Paul, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much, Sir Tim. And thank you very much, Paul, for that fantastic session. And Aaron, thank you so much for doing a great job. And hopefully we can work again in the future. Before we go, I just wanted to just wrap up again here. So let me share my screen real quick. So once again, thank you to our moderator, Aaron, of course, to our two panelists, Sir Tim Clark and Mr. Paul Griffiths. It was a fantastic discussion to hear about what they're doing over at Dubai and at Dubai Airport and at Emirates. With that, that ends the aviation discussion. And before we move into our second discussion, looking at the second sector, hospitality, we just want to play a quick video from our platinum sponsor, the Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority. So please enjoy this video.
I was looking for that which I knew not. I was searching for the peace of just being. I was seeking an adventure beyond the limits of my imagination. I found it. All of it. I found Ras Al Khaimah, or maybe it found me.
Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed that video. That was Ras Al Khaimah, and they are platinum sponsor for the annual summit. I do hope you guys can join us next year for the annual summit, which will be in Ras Al Khaimah. It's a fantastic destination. I've been there before, and I look forward to going back again next year. And with that, we've come to our second half of our session for session 3, talking about revitalizing the industry, and we've come to the hospitality discussion. And with that, let me introduce our interviewer. Everyone should know her. Before joining Skift as the editor-at-large, she was the group editor at TT Asia Media. She is a business journalist, and her beat is travel and tourism. She's won many awards, including Journalist of the Year presented by PATA. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Rainey Hamdi. Rainey, hello.
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. All right, I'll pass this over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. One of the perks of my job is I get to speak to hospitality legends. The industry has evolved and seen many crises, but the quest to create the best products will always remain. And who best to ask about this than Mr. Adrian Zecker? And he really needs no introduction. Hello, Adrian. He's the inventor of distinctive products like Aman, Regent, and GHM. Good afternoon, Adrian. So welcome to this discussion. Let me start by asking you a deceptively simple question. What is the secret of creating a distinctive product?
Well, I came to it a bit late. I've only really done two experiences. One, of course, was the first one, which was as a journalist. I was a journalist to begin with. And for my first 20 years, from the age of 21, when I finished my university education, to the time that I started to become involved with hospitality, I was 39. So this is over 20 years. Was purely in journalism and publishing. I was a publisher. But I became involved in the hospitality by sheer accident. And that was in I was 39. I don't want to feel my age because I'm so old. I'm embarrassed to tell you how old I am. it was purely to a friend of mine, a classmate. he was my classmate where we got our master's degree at Columbia University the same year. And he did it in business, and I did mine in political science, but we were close friends. And he went on to become a very successful business person.
Mm-hmm.
By the time that he introduced me to the hospitality industry, he was already the chief financial head of the Marriott hotel company. And he called me and said, look, we would like to talk to you. And he came to see me. I was based in Hong Kong at the time. I come from Indonesia, but I had started my publishing business with Time magazine 6.5 years. And that was the education I had. It's not university, it was life. And I was very lucky. So and I worked for Time for 6.5 years. And he came out I was already a publisher by the time I was 39, when he came to see me in Hong Kong. And I said, so you came all this time and distance to enjoy my company? And he said, no, I have an objective in mind. I said, okay, what's that? He said, well, you have sold your business. And I hear you just spend your time skiing. And I said, nowadays, over the last 2 years. I said, yes, I love doing it. He said, why? I said, well, I've done 20 years of what I love to do. That's really what I love to do.
Right.
Journalism. And I said, now I don't know what I should do. And he said, well, that's precisely why I think I have an idea, he said. And he said, do you know that a mutual friend has taken over the business I work for now, which is the hotel business and the hotel company, and it is Bill Marriott. He has just taken over from his father. And I said, oh, really? Fantastic. All right, I'll write him a letter of congratulations. And he said, well, he says that they are already the biggest in America, hotel company, but they have never ventured abroad. And the reason for that is his father, Will Marriott, who founded the company, is very conservative, and he was not interested in doing anything outside of the US. But Bill said that's the growth potential there. Many of our competition have done that and are now bigger. So I guess Hilton, Intercontinental. And so, I said, and he says, look, if we're going abroad outside of the US, let's do it in Asia first. Let's go to Asia. And I said, why Asia? And he said, well, the labor cost is actually lower there. And it's a huge market. So he said, that's where we go. So I said to him, yes, but we don't know very much about Asia, or in fact, outside of the US. And so how do we do that? He said, I know, but he said, you go and see Adrian Zecker. and he said, why Adrian? Because he said, his publishing business is all over Asia.
But do you think it's harder to create a distinctive brand or product in today's marketplace, which is so crowded?
No, I think the market is still growing, and of course, so do the products. But that's clearly not diminishing. And once the virus is over, which I hope will be the end by the end of this year at the latest, I think next year we'll see basically business again very, very well developed.
I'm really trying to find out how you build really distinctive products. So I just have one more question. Of all the hotels that you have created, which one is your favorite? And please don't say they are all my children. Name one that comes to your mind right away.
That is difficult. It's not that I'm being evasive here, but because you know they're my favorites for certain reasons. I mean, of course, the first one with Aman, but
Amanpuri, right? Amanpuri in Phuket. Mm.
that is because it was totally an experiment in something new.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because don't forget, Amanpuri was the fourth hotel company that I became involved with, that I had been involved with. The first one was Regent, and the Regent of Hong Kong will always be an incredible experience. And that was the first hotel that I literally contributed very little actually, except that I love beautiful things and so on. But that is really where in my first company, I really brought the projects together rather than actually created them. I had two very experienced and fantastically talented hoteliers, Bob Burns, who was American, and Georg Raphael, who was German.
Mm-hmm.
And they were already well experienced in the hotel business, many years, and already senior people with Hilton and international, what they call intercontinental hotel. And I became the third partner to really find the projects and try to convince them to come and give the management to Regent. That's how I entered the hotel business, helping to find the projects and putting it together and so on. But then the second one was also a very talented hotelier, Siegfried Baal, German also, who was also ex Intercontinental, and with him I became more involved in the actual creation of the product. And we did some very wonderful ones in Australia and Southeast Asia and so on. And the third one was again with George Raphael, who is one of the great hoteliers really in the world. And I learned a lot from being involved in the business, not from the operational side or even the creation side first, and so on. But that started really with when I did the third one, the fourth one, which is Aman.
Right. So,
So well, we were very lucky. We did wonderful hotels in Regent, Raphael, and
Bob Burns. Yeah.
With Sticky Bar and so on. But I started to really create it from scratch, not just finding the sites or helping with finding the investors, but also to actually create the company.
I see.
And that's why I decided to do something totally different. Two different, primarily because the first three have all been in cities, city hotels mainly, and not 100%, but certainly 75%, 80%.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Big hotels, 300, 400, 500 hotels, rooms. And the first Regent, the very first one that I became involved in, was 600 rooms.
Yeah.
So then when I decided now after the coming, that took up something like 12 or 14 years, And then now, when we sold the third one, I decided, okay, what should I do? And I thought, well, why don't you do something different? Meaning not city hotels, but resort hotels.
Right. Yes.
That's number one. And then I decided that there shouldn't be more than 500 rooms, which I've been taught by the experts in the early years of my exposure to the industry, that you should not build too small a number of rooms. And then I said, well, like how much? And they said 500. Well, I decided, why don't I do this in the country? Now, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the difference, of course, is very simple. And there's a seasonality factor. Now, all areas, cities or country would have the same thing, and that you don't have constant 12 months of great.
Right. Yeah. Can I just go back to what you were saying about those hoteliers whom you learned from, like Bob Burns and George Raphael? Who do you think are the hoteliers who are blazing the trail as you did decades ago with Aman? Who are the ones now, you think? Do you have any names?
Oh, there are many. Absolutely many.
I stayed at Aman Jiwo in Yogyakarta a long time ago, but I still remember vividly how it aligns with the Borobudur, the symmetry and the design, in fact, highlighted the temple in such an incredible way. How important is design and architecture to product?
Very important. Reading the product, it is the choice of the first choice, which makes the difference. Eventually, is design.
Not location?
No, the location is also important, but you can't say have a good design in a large location and be a success. You can't. You have to. Design is one, location is the other, and the service is the most important.
Right. Before we go there, I just since you touch on location, because you are a real legend for spotting the right locations to build a hotel. Can we go inside your mind a little bit and see how you visualize a location and know that's the one? How do you do that?
I love your giving the credit for doing that to me, and I'll accept it. But it's not true, because it is not that I just suddenly think. How they all happen. So I know that's what really happens. It's not that I'm sitting quietly smoking my cigar and then suddenly decide, I shall go to that place. Because then nothing could happen. If I go to a place just because I thought that might be a place, I don't know how that thought comes to my mind, unless somebody just said, have you ever thought of X? And then I go to X. No, this doesn't work like that. Because if you do it that way, you probably can't do anything. Simply because you don't know that place. You've never been there. So now you go there and you look around and you find something like Alice in Wonderland. You walk around, you see something you like. This would be a wonderful resort. Well, that's nonsense. That doesn't work like that. You don't know who owns it. You don't know whether you can build anything there. How much it's going to cost. No. What happens is, except for the first Aman, which was the Amanpuri, there I knew where I wanted to go. I knew that I would want to try my new idea there. New idea in the sense that it was not what the usual industry would have done. And that was because for all the rest after that, it has because somebody has come to me who has been to Amanpuri and said, Adrian, why don't you look at that place? I know it is fantastic. Is that and so on. And very often, and I would like to build something like Amanpuri there.
Right. So you start with the product first, and then you get people coming with locations. But then I'm sure you have rejected some locations, no?
Of course, many more than that than I have been asked to do.
So I'm sure that it also is also your gut feel that you feel, hey, this is the right one, right?
After you have gone to go, what if I go there? I know that that site can be developed.
Right.
And I know somebody who has the will to develop it.
I see. Yeah, give an example. Like, for example, your Azirai in Vietnam, right? Those are right locations and opportunities, or how does it
No,
work?
well, that is well, it's a larger picture to it. In that particular instance, I thought that, as you know, with Aman, that helped not the city hotels, but the country resorts and so on. Amanpuri did help to create the start of a movement to do that. That and definitely, as far as ASEAN is concerned, Thailand was the first poster boy.
Yes.
And that was also very lucky for me. But I picked that not because I thought that was the best for the Southeast Asia, but I knew a site there, and that site that unfortunately the site that I knew and had experienced because it belonged to a friend of mine who brought me there. That was not available. So I spent some time to look at other places, but I was already familiar with Phuket and loved it and had been there many times before I started Aman. And so that's why when I thought of doing something not in the city and in the country way and so on, I thought, why not Phuket? I look at it. It's very primitive at the time because it was only a year and some months before the airstrip in Phuket, and you couldn't go to direct. You had to go to Thailand and then take a small plane. The landing strip was not hardscape; it was grass until about a year and a half after I opened in '87. In December 15, 1987 was when we opened Amanpuri. That the year later that you actually landed on proper airstrip.
Yes, I know.
Because my job is creating a hotel and creating life for it. Just having bring a beautiful object and look at that, that's not the hotel business. You create something that has to live. Or else it closes down and disappears. I mean, you know, it's.
Let's talk about COVID a little bit. Earlier, you told me the saddest thing about the pandemic is how a lot of people have lost their jobs in the industry. But do you see any good coming from this crisis for the industry, for the hotel industry?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. Of course, what I believe, as I said earlier, that as soon as the virus is done, it will come back.
Yes,
it must come back. Airlines, people stop flying, people stop going places. I mean, come on. So I don't think it will change now. But to say no, it won't change. That's also very silly, because change is always there.
That's right. Yeah.
Direction it will go and so on. I have never tried to figure that out.
Mhm.
And for me, I just like the creation of the object, and hope that you know that it gives people who look for the project, people
Mm.
who like to travel, who would like to experience places other than where they live, would continue,
Yeah.
and that it will.
So we are running out of time. So I will just ask a few more questions. But one thing we need to address is the younger generation of travelers, because these are your clients for Azirai.
Yes.
What do you think of them? Do they have a lot of what are your thoughts on them?
Well, they're motivated by the same urges, meaning to see places, to experience new experiences, and so on. So there's no difference. But of course, their outlook on life is different. But that is not what I create. I create the comfort of it, the beauty of it. Hopefully, that they like this, the style, the lifestyle of it, and so on. That's I hope that I can keep in touch with that changing element.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's really as simple as that. Now,
Okay.
am I sure that I can do it? No, but I will try.
But you love it, yes.
And I can tell you 5 years from now, if I've grown correctly, it should be the answer. And if it doesn't happen, I can tell you
Okay.
I didn't make it.
Okay, second last question. I mean, since we're talking about younger people, Asia is seeing a lot of younger hotel owners helming the family business. What is your advice to them about creating an Asian brand that will someday be famous globally?
Oh, it is definitely going to happen.
Okay, good, yeah.
I mean, there's so many talented young guys.
Yes, okay, great.
In any industry, really, but why not in the travel industry?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
I think the future is bright. Now, the only problem is what is happening with COVID. It will happen again
Yes.
because this has happened throughout.
Mhm.
The only people say, "What do you think of COVID?" It's not something new. I can remember traveling in the early days of the travel. We always had to have that yellow card.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
right.
could go places without that card. So what is new? And the fact is, we also know historically that there have been many viruses, COVIDs, many.
So we just
The
must.
problem is that this is the first one, but not the last, obviously, that is worldwide. And the reason for that is us.
Yeah, travel.
Travel. We expose in the old days, it's confined to a certain area because where it came up didn't spread everywhere. Now, for the last 15 years, it was possible to spread it everywhere, and everyone it did. That's the problem.
So Adrian, you've accomplished a lot, but is there any personal dream that you haven't yet achieved?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm just thinking of it. I would say not in a large sense that the dream that that you can't even describe and so on. Is there something that I would love to do that I haven't done? Yes. And one particular thing. It's it has to do with the industry also. Is one of it. But in the year 2001, I acquired. I thought I leased, but then later on it turned out that it was so innocent. I actually bought it. The most incredible 150 acres or hectares. I don't know. I have to check that correctly. In the Amazon, and my constant dream since then, this now not almost 25 years ago, is to build a fabulous thing on that site.
Okay.
I haven't done it, but I will do it.
Oh, okay, that's worth waiting for. Thank you so much, Adrian. We're very, very privileged to have you talk to us today. And I will pass you back, us back to Paul. And before we go, by the way, congratulations to Pata on the 70th anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rainey, for those kind words. Yes, it is our 7th anniversary. And thank you very much, Adrian. I mean, with a career spanning 50 years, you have so much knowledge and you've seen so many things. I mean, when you were talking about Phuket and how, it was still just a jungle and not even an airstrip. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I mean, if you look at it today, it's hotels are everywhere. There's so much there. So really, you can probably spend hours and days listening to all the stories that you have. So thank you so much, Adrian. And of course, thank you so much, Rainey, for agreeing to moderate or interview Adrian for this session.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with that, again, thank you guys. And you guys can both leave. And I'll just do a quick wrap up here as we move to the next session. So once again, thank you, Adrian and Rainey. And as I end session 3, once again, thank you to our sponsors, Ras Al Khaimah, GTEF, Airbnb 2031, and iFree Group. Now, our next set, we've heard about Reflect, we've heard Reconnect and Revive. So our next session is going to look into what's next. We've heard from sort of non-governmental organizations. We've heard from both aviation and hospitality. The next session, we'll actually hear from what's next from the public sector. So if you want to join that session, this session will end. You just have to go into the program and click on session 4. That session is sponsored by our good friends at 2031. There you'll be able to join that. It will be happening in just about 10 minutes or so. So please do join us then, and I will see you then. And with that, if you have any questions about today's session, feel free to email me. Again, my name is Paul Brangan. I'm Director of Communications and External Affairs at PATA, and my email is paul@pata.org. And with that, I will see you at the next session. Thank you.